Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Focus podcast. I'm your host, Singinlisa. So glad you're here. This is the place where we inspire, motivate, empower, and impact. I bring the focus on people doing great things in the community and beyond. And today we're going to meet a doctor. It is Dr. George Walker. He is going to be a part of our Reminiscence Series that is allowing us to meet great people and share their experience and their journey that has brought them to where they are today. He's going to take us on a trip and let us get a peek back into his past that shaped him to be the doctor he is today. He's going to share about college. He's going to share about some highs and some lows and some scary moments, moments that made him proud, moments that made him laugh, and you will laugh too. So get ready as we take a trip and we journey and we reminisce with Dr. George Walker. Let's meet our guest now. It's the Focus Podcast. New Orleans, and before you is Dr. George Stanley Walker, and you are going to really enjoy getting to know him and his work and contribution. And so, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, and please let everyone know how it all began for you because you've got some history here that we need to learn about.
Well, it all started in DeKalb, Texas, which is where I was born. At the time, my father was in the Army, and my mother was one of the teachers in Garland, which is a small community uh, in DeKalb. And of course, after that, my father came back and went to Wiley College to get his degree. And my mother had a degree, and she was one of the few teachers in DeKalb or Garland. Garland was important because it was an area where it had a number of educated black people. In fact, it was one of the few areas where the black school went to the 12th grade. Most stopped at the 6th grade. So a number of rather well-educated people came out of it. And after we left there, we went to Texarkana, Texas. My mother was a teacher at the time, and my father became a working for the Air Force, and his job was computer and helping people learn how to work radar. He was a radar technician, which he did for about 30 years. We had a chance to go to California. Instead, my father elected to go to Biloxi, Mississippi, the Keesler Air Force Base. And at the time, we thought it was all over. But it ended up that Biloxi was the most interesting place in Mississippi. Uh, and the people there were mixed communities, there were mixed neighborhoods, and people were just different. And we found that when you started talking about the coast, almost all of the communities that touched the Gulf of Mexico had a completely different way of looking at things as opposed to the northernmost areas. And we had the smallest school in the state, a
Wow.
total of 350 students from the first through the 12th grade.
My goodness. So everybody knew everybody.
Everybody knew everybody. Now, there was a Catholic school there, our Mother of Sorrow, and those children came from Pascagoula all the way around to Bay St. Louis, and were bussed in until they had so few patients, so few kids that we all came all came to the public schools. But the public school at that circumstance was really superior to any other quote black public school in the state.
Mm.
After I graduated from Nichols, which, and by the way, while I was there, I learned how to wait tables because one of my best friends, his father was a waiter in Biloxi, and I learned that. I learned a number of things that really did me a positive most in other things when I was in Atlanta. And by the way, I went to Morehouse in Atlanta. And while I was at Morehouse, I decided I'd get a job. And I was working as a an assistant to the waiter uh, at a place called the Abbey. Uh, and my waiter, some reason, had appendicitis, and I convinced the manager to let me hold his tables until he got back. And every client that I saw, I made sure they had fantastic service, and I made sure they knew who I was. So when he got back 4 weeks later, they were asking for me.
A great setup.
And that's right. And for the next 4 years, that was the job I had on weekends.
Hmm.
And while I was there, though, of course, it was the time when the Atlanta University, we had all of the associated problems with what was going on as far as race relations. While I was there, I actually was able to sit up in the chemistry area and watch the funeral for MLK. The AU Center was a hotbed of people who no longer were going to take what was happening. And luckily, we had very few people who actually got injured. Uh, Atlanta ended up being probably the best place in Georgia where this could have occurred because it had an enormous number of educated blacks because of the AU Center had four schools there at Morehouse, Spelman, Clark, and Morris Brown, as well as the school associated with ministry. And those schools were within walking distance to each other, and really helped to progress as far as other places that wanted to know what was going on. This is where they came to learn how to do it. One of my best friends, who I had gone to in Texarkana uh, I was in, let's see, first through the sixth grade, and he and I were friends from kindergarten. Uh, my parents moved from Texarkana to Biloxi, and I ran back into him at Morehouse.
Wow.
Yeah, at Morehouse, and he was he was so happy to be there that he literally flunked out the first semester because he was so busy demonstrating
Mm.
that he couldn't pass.
Hmm.
He went back home and went to Texas Southern. He begged his parents that if they would let him come back, that he would do well. He said because Texas Southern had no idea what was going on in the world.
Yes.
Sure enough, he came back
Hmm.
and stayed the entire 4 years
And
and,
excel.
and excelled, right?
So he kept his promise.
Right.
Very good. Well, I'm not sure before we jumped in if I let you say the type of doctor you are because I wanted everybody to just get right to getting to know you. But please share with us what do you do in your career?
I am an ear, nose, and throat doctor. After I left Morehouse, I went to Emory, which is really down the street. Uh, and I was the second black student in Emory's medical school. The first black student at Emory's medical school was also from Morehouse. And the dean came over to our dean and asked whom would they suggest, and I was chosen.
Mm.
Uh, at Emory, initially I had some serious doubts as to what was going to happen, but I ran into a student who was probably, he was an older guy who had worked for a number of aerospace companies and decided he could not care whether or not they made it to the moon or not. And so he came to Emory to become a pediatrician, even though he was about 10 years older than the rest of us.
Wow.
And he became a pediatrician and became head of a department in the University of Tennessee. But I will have to say this. There were some questions initially having to do with what was going to happen at Emory. But I never did see what I considered to be blatant racism at Emory. Uh, in my first year, we had a group of kids, I'm sorry, doctors, pre-doctors from the University of Georgia. And the University of Georgia was playing, let's see, Georgia Tech. Andrew Young, whom I knew through my wife, I was over at his house, and he said, George, I don't want to go to this game. He said, here's 4 tickets. Give them to somebody. So I went back over to Emory, and I went up to the Georgia boys, and they were talking about getting tickets. I said, I'll tell you what, here's 4 tickets. Enjoy. And these were on the 50-yard line. Uh, and they said, look, George, we'll pay you for it. I said, no, 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 no. I mean, why should you pay me for something that I can't use? Well, about 6 weeks after that, they came to me and they said, George, we have every test that's been given in medicine for the last 20 years. He said, we have decided that we know what the next test is, and we would like to know if you'd like to come and study with us. I said, really? He said, yes. So for the next 2 years, I got invited over to the Phi Chi, I think that was the name of the
Greek
group.
organization.
Yeah.
Wow.
And for that reason, I graduated dead in the middle. Thank God to them.
My goodness.
But
what great tickets.
It were great tickets, but they ended up being really good guys.
Yes.
And that surprised me because I had thought that some people who came after me thought that they had been given a raw deal, but I never experienced that. And maybe I wasn't smart enough to see it.
Well, I think at times every person's experience is so unique and individual that it could have just been your experience, which doesn't mean that it was not, that it didn't exist, or maybe, as you said, it wasn't as severe or critical for, as some would see it. I think that speaks to the interpretation that everybody has about exactly what's going on during their time. It was a benefit to you, and I think you weren't looking for that, for one thing.
That's true.
And I think that makes a difference, because sometimes when you're looking for a fight or looking to stir something up, you basically can get it done. And so I think that is such a wonderful example of really kindness, because you just you did something that didn't seem like a big deal to you.
Well, Dr. Hughley, who was over hematology, when he would when he was talking, he would say "nigra." And whenever he said "nigger," everybody in the class would turn and look at me. So one day I was in the administration office, and he was in the elevator with me, and he says, George, well, how do you like mine? And I said, well, doctor, I like it with the exception of one thing. He said, what is it? I said, you notice that when you say the word "nigger," people all look at me and start grinning and laughing? He said, yes, I have noticed that. I said, the reason why is because, usually we'd rather be called Negro, not Negro. And he looked at me and he says, George, I apologize. He says, now that he says, I'm from the South. He says, that's what and he said, I apologize. He said, I hope you'll overlook. I said, thank you. Well, the next time he was
in class
dictating, he said, and the Negro. And everybody in the class looked up, turned and looked at me.
And wondered what happened.
And I went, I have no idea.
Wait a minute, he changed? They were wondering.
They were wondering. They thought maybe, but I never told them otherwise. I never told them about it. I mean, and every time I'd see him, he'd speak and we'd talk.
Yes.
And I found that while I was there, Katrina hit. Not Katrina. What's the other one?
Before Camille?
Camille. Camille hit. And I had just left Biloxi the afternoon that it hit, and had gone to Atlanta. And I was talking to my mother, and we were living in Biloxi, Gulfport at the time. And as my mother was talking to me, the line went dead. Well, 2 days later, the dean called me in and asked me what was the circumstance in Gulfport, and I told her I had not talked to my parents or anybody, and we didn't know what was going on. So she told me that at that point, if I needed to leave and go home, they would take care of what was necessary. So I left the class and went to my I went to where I was living. And as I'm walking out of the door, the phone rang, and I picked the phone up, and my father said, "Do not come."
Wow.
He says, "We're in Hattiesburg right now,
Okay.
and nobody's working, nobody's dead." The window fell out, he says, "but we don't have any problems. We have uh, we have the Serval refrigerator." I don't know if anybody knows about Serval refrigerators. It's a gas refrigerator,
Uh-huh.
and we had bought it when we were in Texas and brought it with us, and he was storing it. And they didn't
Wow.
have electricity, but they had gas, so it was the only refrigeration
Oh
in the
my goodness.
neighborhood.
Wow. And what is that? Survey. You're teaching
Serval
me something.
gas refrigerator.
Okay, we're gonna have to put. I'm gonna have to
And
put a
at the
picture of
time,
that
it was
up.
about 20 years old.
Wow.
And my father, interestingly enough, my father put it back in storage,
Mhm.
and a man came by and bought it
From him.
because he wanted to use it in his fishing camp
Mm.
with butane, so it may be still working.
Wow. Well, things well made usually do
Yeah.
last quite a long time. I've never heard of that. So
Yep.
that's a lesson for me. So would that be the equivalent of today, people using a generator
Well, no,
in
what
some?
happens is that the Serval refrigerator used gas,
Okay.
and it somehow made things were cold.
Okay.
They stopped making them because the electrical things became so good. Air conditioners also ran by gas at that time,
Mm.
but they were not as effective as the present electricity. So they really, but if you're off the grid, you can buy a
Hmm.
Serval gas refrigerator.
Wow. Well, okay.
Yeah.
They might get a surge in purchases now with everybody learning. Hey, this is Singing Lisa, and thanks for enjoying the Focus podcast. We'll talk more with our guest in just a moment. But of course, I wanted to say if this is your first time here or you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button so I will know and leave a comment. I'd love to engage with you. And of course, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss another video. Now, that little bell, the notification, it will let you know when I upload the next one, so you're in the front row for the next video. Let's get back into the Focus podcast and enjoy more with our guest.
Well, being at Morehouse was really important because I found that the teachers there were very understanding, and I have a real problem with foreign languages. And there was no way in the world I could pass foreign languages. So I went to Senorita, whatever, and I told her, I said, "There's no way I can pass this." She says, "Mr. Walker, you come every day. You try hard as you can. I give you C minus." I said, "Thank you."
Okay. That's a deal.
Yeah.
You can do that. That is
But I
fantastic.
found that the teachers there were very, they were trying to do the best they could, and none of them were really trying to hurt you or
Mm-hmm.
to embarrass you.
Mm-hmm.
And I came out of Morehouse with the idea that if there was a way that they could help you, they would do that.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I found that I started looking the same. Now, while I was there, I ended up at Emory because the dean had called the doctor over biology, and he suggested. But in my class, and I think my class was about maybe 70, 80 people. Six of us went to medical school.
Mm. Beautiful.
Yeah, six of us went to medical school. And after medical school, I spent a residency at Grady, which was very informative. It's one of those situations where if you need help and you ask for help, you get it. Uh, and then I was drafted. It was toward the downtime of Vietnam, but I was still drafted. And at that point, I was sent to Aberdeen, Maryland,
Mm.
As an associate with the ear, nose, and throat department out of Bethesda,
Mm.
which I learned a lot of things having to do with ear, nose, and throat, and I therefore decided to go into ear, nose, and throat. So then I went to at Philadelphia Temple to ask if they had any openings, and went to Bellevue. And at Bellevue, they were people were actually asking for slots 3 and 4 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And when I came, the guy says, "When are you available?" I
Oh.
said, "In 6 months." He says, "Want to come here?" Well, on my way home, I stopped off at Temple, and they said the same thing. And so my wife said, "Well, I'd rather go to Philadelphia than New York." So what happens is that out of medical school or the internship, they were going and asking for slots 2 years
early.
Yeah.
Okay, so they weren't ready.
They weren't ready.
Got it.
So the chief said, somebody always drops out, and then you're trying to find somebody. He said, "You are it."
Yeah.
So I said, in other words, the best thing to do is to go real early or real late. He said, "That's absolutely right."
So you were actually there on time
On time.
because of the time that you did go. Now, was that the start of your ear, nose, and
That
throat
was the
career?
start of my. Well, I was given some information when I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky, but that was the first true circumstance where I could practice ear, nose, and throat, and I found it to be really a good experience. Philadelphia had, I think it's 3 medical schools and 2 osteopathic schools. I mean, it's got schools all over the place. And one of our hospitals was Temple University Hospital, as well as 2 other hospitals, and our job was to help cover the ear, nose, and throat and the department. And at that time they had a special area called bronchoesophagology, which is no longer there because you use straight tubes to look in people's lungs and into their esophagus. Now everything is flexible, but I mean it was if and by the time I got out, it was no longer a something that you could do because everything was flexible. And now
was that
it's
better on the practice itself?
Well, at the time when you're using a straight tube trying to look in somebody's esophagus, you have to have good technique.
Yeah.
Now, if you got a thing that wiggles around, you can get by with almost anything. So basically, they became completely different circumstances, and that bronchoesophagology was dropped, and it became part of medicine, general medicine, as opposed to an ear, nose, and throat discipline. But the guys who were doing that, they only had 2 groups that were doing that, and they had a number of people in Philadelphia who had esophageal scarring because of the way they cleaned the front door steps. The front door steps in Philadelphia were limestone, and they would take lye and go there and clean the steps. But lye did not come in the container it comes in now that you have to have special ways. It came and they would put it in bottles, Coke bottles. Kids would get it and
So they were really handling it.
That's right. And if you drank it, you had burns, and you had to have your esophagus dilated
My goodness.
Yeah, that was, and then you had to look into the lungs, and you had straight tubes for that. I mean, none of the everything was straight. So you had to have technique to get in there. And it was a specialty, and it was an ear, nose, and throat specialty.
Now, when that was done, was a patient particularly, were they sedated at the time? Well, because of this?
Some people had to be sedated, but a person who had to be dilated, let's say 4 or 5 years or 5 years, they would literally take it. You give them something to numb it, and they would straighten out the neck so that you could go straight down, and you just go down, and they had to have it done about every 6 weeks. So these people, if they were given anesthesia, they had to come out of the anesthesia, and most of the time just going down, 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 and away they go.
Yeah. Wow. So they just learned to grin
They
and bear,
learned
so
how to
speak.
handle it. Yeah, they had no choice.
Now, was this preventable because they handled the lye? Was that something that they learned they could handle a different way so they didn't have the problem?
No, what happened was so many people there had the problem, they started putting it in special containers that children could not get into. And that's where that came from. In fact, one of the doctors who was an expert at that was partly responsible for them putting it in those containers because it went all the way up to the Congress, and that's the only way it could be sold.
My
But of
goodness.
course, now nobody has it because nobody uses it. But that was, for some reason, people in Philadelphia thought the most important thing was white limestone steps.
My goodness. And a heavy price.
Yes,
They paid for that.
yeah,
So my goodness. Well, that's such, and it really says a lot about what's unique to a certain area, a certain city.
it is.
And because somebody else would say, well, that didn't make
That's right.
sense.
Nowhere else in the country were white steps important.
So they could stake the claim for that all their own. Well, you have so many wonderful stories and experiences, and so at this point in your career, when at that time, I should say, what were you thinking about your life and the idea? Because of course, you're living in a time where, of course, there was racism, there was just tension. I'm sure everybody didn't necessarily treat you with a great smile or greet you that way. So, how did you handle a basic, I guess, day or your average
Well,
circumstance?
after I finished that, my wife and I decided that we would come to New Orleans. In fact, a black group, Joseph Epps and his group, they had a member in their group there at the University of Pennsylvania, and he contacted me about coming down here, and I came down. Uh, at the time, they did not have any black ENTs in the state. And quite honestly, I'll have to admit that uh, I did not have a, I had very few negative circumstances. And in fact, the one negative circumstance I remember mostly is when I put in an application for Baptist. Uh, I did not have a problem with Touro or the ENT Hospital or Hotel Du or just Baptist. And I had forgotten about it. And 15 years later, I get a phone call from an administrator wondering if I still want to go on the.
Oh my goodness.
So
15
I
years?
said, "What?" I said, he says, "Yes, you." I said, "Well, what's happened?" Uh, what had happened was Baptists have what they call itinerant surgeons who were all over the place,
Hmm.
and they were difficult to deal with.
Mm.
And I found that I found that I did not want to deal with them. And Methodist, uh, Hotel Du were my primary. After I came back from Katrina, I started working at Touro. Never had any trouble with Touro. The only place I had a major problem
Mm.
was Baptist. And when they asked if I wanted to become a member, I declined.
Mm. And rightfully so.
Yeah.
My goodness. Well, those experiences, of course, have brought us to where we are today, and we see a resurgence, as we see, often many years in racism again, in tension again, because of something happening, and of course, everybody, again, their experience is different, and it happens in different ways. So we've had the police situation, we've had unfair killings and whatnot, and of course justice just never seems to get across to the people that really deserve it. So what have been your thoughts these last months? And we haven't even gotten to the pandemic, but what have been your thoughts with what has happened this last year?
Well, the good thing I have found that New Orleans is really different. Uh, it has a completely different tenure. Uh, you can live in areas where people next to you are different. And in actual fact, when we moved here, we moved to New Orleans East, and when we moved there, half of the our neighborhood was white, and they were in the process of moving out, and blacks were coming in. Uh, what happened then? We decided that we wanted to move out of that, and we moved up to Trafalgar, which is up near the racetrack. And at that point, my wife decided that she wanted to go back to Atlanta because she had deep roots there, and I decided I would stay here. Now, I have at the present time the best circumstance I have found initially I saw when I was still in college and we would come to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. Uh, at that time, Mardi Gras was not considered outside of the city important, but we came one year and we went back to Morehouse and we had an examination, and the chemistry teacher wanted to know why we were asleep. And we told him that we had just gotten in from Atlanta. And he said, "Why have you been in Atlanta?" And we told him, he said, "Really?" He said, "Y'all go back and get some sleep and you can take the exam Friday."
He couldn't believe the story.
Well, no, when we got through talking
He
to
just
him,
understood.
but interestingly enough,
Mm-hmm.
between that time we got a job at the airport for Eastern Airlines, and we were selling tickets.
Okay.
And people would come in and they would ask for a ticket to go to Mardi Gras.
Oh.
We oversold so many tickets that Eastern Airlines had to bring in 2 planes.
Oh my goodness.
And and the guy over us was getting ready to fire us until one of the higher ups came up and wanted to know who did it, and they pointed to us. And they said, "You think this will happen every year?" And I said, "Well, yes." So
Okay.
we had a job there.
Oh my goodness. Another opportunity.
Another opportunity.
I
They
love it.
had not thought about
Yes.
having special flights from Atlanta to New Orleans for Mardi Gras.
Oh my goodness. Well, we have a lot. We owe you a lot. People sometimes don't know how things start, and a lot of times it's just through error and just through normal circumstances that you thought, well, why wouldn't you want people to have tickets to go?
That's right. Well,
That's wonderful.
yeah, when we came here, things had just opened up in French Quarter,
Mm-hmm.
and my friends and I decided that we would go down to the French Quarter, and we had 3 young ladies, and they wanted to go with us. So we decided we'd go to the strip joint. So we get in the strip joint, and they bring the bill, and the bill was $13. Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, then $13 was a lot of money. And the Coke came in little bitty things like this, and they were $3 a piece. So we had to borrow the money from the ladies.
Oh my goodness.
So the next day we go over to the young lady's house, and the ladies cooked breakfast for us, and they had all told their mothers where we had gone. And the mothers had told their fathers that they had. So we didn't know what was happening. So we in the back with the guys, and they said, "What'd y'all see?"
Well, you have taken some really, I guess, not really cautious steps, but they've all been, good results. Everybody is curious.
Yeah, everybody
for the
wanted to know
things that you have seen.
And I mean, and we didn't have enough sense to realize we really weren't supposed to be down there. But
yeah, well, it speaks a lot of what you don't know. And I
yes,
think that may add to the phrase where they say ignorance is bliss, because some things you just don't know really lead you to some, momentary, if
that's
not
right.
joy, that other people can say, well, wait, what was that like? And so you really open doors for people to be able to just ask questions, really.
That's right. One of the things we had a friend who got married the weekend of Martin Luther King after he was killed. And we drove from Atlanta to here for the wedding. And we were picked up on I-10 by uh, the Alabama Highway Patrol, because we were speeding. On the way back, we were stopped by the Alabama Highway Patrol, and they pulled us over and said, "You have one service station open in Mobile and one in Montgomery. Do not pass it."
Wow. Great advice.
Yes, because I mean, there was nobody on the highway. They were afraid that there was going to be a lot. And we got back to Atlanta, and we were staying. We were going to go to the funeral, the march down, but there were so many people in the street coming off the Capitol, that we went to Morehouse and we went up in the chemistry department and we sat there and watched it from the chemistry department on Morehouse's campus.
My goodness. And what was that experience like? Well, what was the mood in the room?
It was, I mean, the people coming off the hill from the what happened was they came out of the church.
Okay.
And as they came out the church, it was supposed to have been on Morehouse's campus because that's where they were having the funeral. But they had the wagon coming down, and you off the Capitol, the Capitol Dome, there is a decline. And as you came down, that's the pictures you saw of the big groups of people with the little wagon. That's where those pictures were taken.
Wow.
And they were coming there to have that funeral on Morehouse's campus. So we were sitting there watching it. I am surprised how quiet that was. There was everybody was pissed, but nobody wanted to in any way keep that from being a very, very somber occasion.
Just total respect.
That's right. Total respect.
Yes. Hey, this is Singinlisa, and thanks for enjoying the Focus podcast. We'll talk more with our guest in just a moment. But of course, I wanted to say if this is your first time here or you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button so I will know. And leave a comment. I'd love to engage with you. And of course, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss another video. Now, that little bell, the notification, it will let you know when I upload the next one so you're in the front row for the next video. Let's get back into the Focus podcast and enjoy more with our guest. So, do you find that the way that life was then, in some ways, more simple?
Yes, it was more simple. But I think the most important thing that Morehouse did for me is we had kids there whose fathers were physicians, and we had orphans. In fact, the guy in my room, parents had died when he was a child, and he had been brought up by his cousins. And he came to Morehouse with a paper bag.
Wow.
Came with a paper bag. And it was not unusual for people who came there who had to stay on campus during the summer because they had nowhere to go for summer.
And really the goal for everybody, even at Morehouse or at any university at that particular time, more so was just to become educated.
Yes.
To do better.
It was interesting to me that Morehouse had given someone a toll ride for that under that circumstance. And he used it really well. He went into the Army and then went to Vietnam and was injured in Vietnam, which really, but he was a linguist, and he knew French, German, and something else.
Wow. And so he took your spot.
That's right. That's right.
He took care of that for you. That was wonderful. Well, he turned out to be, and I think they could see that. A lot of times what you're saying is people would look at people, and a lot of times there would be just numbers or names on a paper, and you would say yes, no, rejected, accepted. But in many cases, the stories we hear today and the success that we stand on is really because people were looked at as people and given an opportunity that wouldn't have come another way. And every opportunity that was given, you ran away with it and really excelled.
Well, the teachers did something like that, all the way from Miss Jones when I was in kindergarten, all the way up. I mean, I have yet to have run into a teacher at that time who was not interested in their students. Yeah. I mean, if they could help, they did. In fact, my mother was a teacher, and that's all she became pissed off when they took her out of the black school and took her into the white school when they had integration, because she said that all they did was bring the best black teachers and put them with white, and the worst white teachers into black schools.
Oh my goodness. They made a switch because they saw where the best was coming from.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump into the 20th century, 21st. We're moving real fast. But, as you've had all these years to just have these experiences and you have something to compare to where we are today, do you think that the march and the demonstrations that have happened have really been the best or most effective way to bring change today?
Well, during that time, of course, you realized they had the marches.
Sure.
And the marches at that time, you had to worry because you didn't know if people were going to get injured severely or otherwise. But if that's what you have to do to get your point across, and it is not done with maliciousness or injury, you do it if it works. Because if you don't push people, they won't change.
Yes. Very true. Now, recently we've lost on the same day two of our last really tough pioneers that just led the way and kept the fight going. What are your thoughts on that? It's so amazing that on the same day that happened, but such two powerful, significant individuals.
You remember Herman Cain?
Yes.
Well, Herman Cain was in my class.
Oh my goodness. You keep blowing my mind.
Okay.
You've told me about Andrew Young in your house. I mean, I am talking to a legend right here. You've really had great connections, and so what was that like?
Actually, my wife had the connection.
Well, hey, you're in good company.
Because Andrew Young's wife
Uh-huh.
and Martin Luther King's wife were both from the same area in Alabama.
Wow.
So Marion, Alabama, and that's where she was from Marion, Alabama, and that's how I got to know those people through her.
So some would say you married well.
Yeah. I don't know what she's going to think about it, but
well, it's just fantastic just to be able to say that because you have the stories, you have the experience, you knew them firsthand, and you knew them personally.
Right.
And what I love is that they were people.
They were.
They had their ups and downs, good days, bad days, but there was something they believed in. And do you find that that may be missing in individuals today? Are people just not focused on the right thing?
I think now that there is so much information, and a lot of information is not necessarily true or reasonable or even helpful. And you also have a group of people like Herman Cain who are more interested in themselves than anything else. And now it's disseminated so easily that you don't know what to really think or whom should you
believe.
That's right.
And then so much more media now.
Media.
Oh my goodness.
Because we're talking about a time when if you had a television, it was mostly black and white and maybe 2 channels, 3 channels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So word of mouth really, and the newspaper.
Oh yes.
The one newspaper.
Yeah.
Probably was your source of information, and it just didn't get misconstrued the way that it is today.
When the AU Center would have a big demonstration, the other schools would all come together and they would sit down and they would plan it. If it was necessary to go somewhere, of course, what would happen was you'd get people who had automobiles and you would decide how you were going to get there without having to run into the police on the way. We found that going through Alabama, 10 cars going through Alabama in rural Alabama, no cop in that area is going to bother it.
Wow.
They act like you didn't even, that's the best way. They didn't see it.
Because it was large?
Large numbers, and you think 2 people in a cop car is going to stop 10 or 15 cars loaded? They never saw it. And we found out that we didn't tell people, so you went and did it, you got back, and the less you said, the better.
And I think you just said something very powerful. The less you said, the better.
Yeah.
Do you think some days today, people are just saying too much?
Too much.
And it seems as though everybody wants to be right. And everybody wants to be heard.
Everybody wants to be heard.
And so they just don't, care. They've had enough. They just want to say it at all cost. And sometimes that's taking a life.
Well, the thing is, they want to be seen.
Yeah.
At the time, the newspaper was the primary area.
Mhm.
And so television was in its, it was there, but it was not something that was, it was afterwards, not at the time. So they
Mhm.
showed what happened.
Mhm.
But the Atlanta Constitution was a good newspaper, and it was really quite reasonable, and you could believe what was said. But there were also the papers at the AU Center that were uh, uh, given by the people doing the necessary work,
Mhm.
and we would read those too. But Atlanta was the best place for that at the time. I mean, it was had a number of people, had a huge black audience
Mhm.
there, and everybody, for the most part, were not trying to be important, but to be part of what was happening.
Yes, and give accurate information.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I hope that, we continue to look back at history to remember the positives and the success that did come out of really hard choices, that people had to make. And so the message that we have, for people to be positive is just to never give up. Do you have a particular message that you end up speaking to people about in this day, maybe somebody younger who you encourage? What do you tell the person looking at you said, okay, you made it through your time. What do I do?
Well, I have two children. I have a daughter who is in Atlanta, and I have a son who is here. Uh, my son, my son is an interesting person. My son is went to 7 schools in 8 years in
Wow.
elementary.
Okay.
Uh, uh, and when we came in from Philadelphia, uh, he was at Gene Gordon, good school, and in May of that year, we found he could not read.
Wow.
I wanted to know how he had A's if he couldn't read. So my wife decided that she was going to take care of that. So we went to a a doctor who evaluates the kid, and she had him copy a drawing, which was a pyramid and a circle. He did it, but they didn't touch. And she said because they didn't touch, he had a problem with spatial. And I looked
Mm.
at her and I said, "You have got to be joking." My wife says, "No,
Wow.
she's an expert." I said, "I don't give a damn what she is. That's crazy." So one day, riding down, my wife saw a sign. I forgot the name of this fancy school,
Mhm.
and so she drives in, and the headmaster says, "Our black student has graduated, and we need another."
Oh my goodness.
So my wife says, "Well, I tell you what, you may have my daughter, but you have to have my son, and you can't keep him in the first grade." So you, and he said, "Deal." And get,
Quota met.
that's right.
2 times.
So he went to a special teacher first thing in the morning, and by Thanksgiving, he was reading on grade level.
Oh my goodness. So you were right. The teacher didn't know she was talking.
I mean,
The expert.
yes,
And if she did, he got over it very quickly. Wow. Really, you were focused. You had to say, no, no, I'm not accepting
well,
that.
it didn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, did you just say he was just lazy? Somebody
No,
just,
he was smart.
yeah.
He was playing.
Oh,
He was playing everybody.
he was probably done before everybody else.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
and I found another thing that happened here, which was very interesting, is that I was working at ear, nose, and throat over on Broad, and a young lady brought her daughter in who had just graduated, and she wanted her to go to Tulane uh, speech pathology, and they said she couldn't go because she had a hearing loss. Well, I wrote a letter said, hearing as long as she can hear, as far as I'm concerned, that is not a problem, and do not use that as an excuse. Well, about I guess 20 years, maybe
Mm-hmm.
25 years later,
Mm-hmm.
my brother was looking for a job uh, in New York, and had gone to one of the, the upper people who were hiring folk, and this young lady was talking and everything, and she noticed that his name was Walker.
Mm-hmm.
So she came over and she said, "Do you have anybody in New Orleans who you're kin to?" He said, "Yeah, my brother's there."
Mm-hmm.
She said, "What is your brother's name?" She said, "His name is George." She said, "Your brother is responsible for me being here."
My goodness. You're a rock star.
Well, I mean, I'm going, how in the world would you, but she was the
It lines
first
up.
one up there that they brought and put in that position,
My
and
goodness.
she remembered it enough.
Yes. Yes. Well, I don't think you forget an experience that changed her life, evidently, because if someone closed the door because of a slight difference, you allowed them to overlook that and consider her anyway. And she excelled because you knew she could.
But it's,
Wow.
I guess you never know
Mm-hmm.
how things work out unless you try,
That's a great statement.
unless you participate.
That's a great statement. Phenomenal. Now we're gonna wrap this up because I could just hear your entire life story. But where we are today, and we've had we're in hurricane season. Okay, so we're accustomed to that, but we have a pandemic. How has your practice changed? For you, because what was your day like before this came along?
And this is going to sound very crazy.
Okay.
My patients love it.
They love the distancing.
Well, yeah, but it allows them to get in and out quickly.
Okay.
And I would never have thought, I thought they were coming to see me. They're coming to find out how things are and go.
Right.
So they don't spend as much time with me, but of course, if they have a question, I let them call and I discuss it. But I have as little face-to-face as possible, but I still get a lot of phone calls and I pick them up and I answer. So in a way, it has been positive, but it has actually allowed me to have a closer circumstance with patients because when I'm talking to them on the phone, I actually can go into more detail.
Do you do any video calls or appointments?
I have done a few.
Okay.
But most will call me and they will say, "Dr. Walker, such and such and such," and I'll say, "Number one, you got a fever?"
Wow.
Yeah. What is it? Okay. We had at the very beginning of the pandemic, before it hit the news, I had 4 patients who came in to see me one Monday morning, and they were all there because they had quote unquote bronchitis.
Oh.
And I treated them for bronchitis. And whenever I treat bronchitis, I use steroids. And the dexamethasone is my favorite. They did beautifully for a week.
Okay.
And a week later, they came back because the bronchitis had come back. At that point, the pandemic and the circumstances of the pandemic, I sent them to their primary doctor.
Okay.
3 of the 5 ended up in the hospital. 2 ended up at home quarantined.
Oh my goodness.
The 3 at the hospital died.
Oh no.
At the time, I was a little concerned the fact that I had used steroids because I thought maybe it had made them more vulnerable.
Okay.
But lo and behold, it ends up that it decreases the inflammation, and that's why it's now used.
Yes.
But at the time, see, I wasn't treating
Once again,
the pandemic. I was treating bronchitis.
Yes. Yes.
And
my goodness.
I mean, sometimes you get lucky. It ain't. It's just pure luck. And I can understand why steroids would work because it gets rid of the inflammation. I mean, I'm sure somebody else had thought about it, but I had not thought about it because of what I had heard in the circumstances.
Sure.
Otherwise, I would have been happy to give it to him again. But at the time, it was not the procedure.
Well, so much was unknown.
That's right.
And not understood in the beginning. So how would you actually know 100% what actually would work?
Or even there was a possibility that it could worsen.
Yeah.
And that's
generally what do steroids do for a person?
Decrease inflammation.
Okay.
Well, it ends up that's what they were using, but they have some negative problems with steroids.
Okay.
It ends up that those pulmonary guys who use dexamethasone got a better response than people who didn't. So all it did was get rid of the swelling and the inflammation.
Okay.
Well, not being a pulmonary person, I hadn't thought of that, but a lot of other pulmonary people hadn't thought about it either.
Mm-hmm. Did it allow them to treat them more effectively?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So when I thought I had hurt somebody and caused a problem, I actually kind of prolonged
Yes.
because of ignorance.
And then as we've learned, other underlying issues really have become the cause of a lot of people dying because of just complications.
But the thing is, I'm beginning to wonder about that. I have diabetes.
Okay.
And I have had it for the last 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm not overweight and I don't have a whole lot of other things,
Mm-hmm.
I keep my diabetes
Mm-hmm.
in check, not
Mm-hmm.
totally controlled, because too tight it actually is worse than.
Mm-hmm. And you live in New Orleans.
And I live in New Orleans, but I have not, and I am really careful as to being in circumstances where it would allow me to be compromised. When I go to the grocery store, and I go to a grocery store where if you don't have a mask, they ask you to put it on.
Right.
Yeah. If you don't wipe your, that's what I want, because I want to be reminded.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot understand people who just assume. Well, I'll put it like this: 4 of my friends had the virus after they had gone to church.
Mm. Yes, we've heard that.
Yeah.
Not church.
None of them died from it. Right. But I told them, I said, that's what you get for going to church. St. George don't tell me that. I mean,
what? Yeah, what a topic. That was the last straw.
And it was the same church.
People. Yeah. Oh, they were together?
Well, what happened was, it was a church I used to go to, but it's so far away now. I live and they actually come in town and go to church, and they've been doing. But at the time, no one knew what the circumstances were and what the transmission was.
Absolutely.
I mean, what happened is that these folk who came into town for Mardi Gras is where it came from.
Yeah. And, I had an interview with one doctor who made a great point about the fact that we have technology to thank for probably a lot of the progress that has, gone forward and still is developing for the vaccine. He said, but yeah, that same technology helped airlines, progress, and you probably would have sold them a ticket to make sure they made it to Mardi Gras. But yeah, because of technology, it's kind of done a positive negative because it allowed so many people to come.
But you notice that when they had the demonstrations, they did not have an increase.
Yes.
Because those people were wearing the mask.
Right.
Right off the bat, that should have said, it's obvious that works.
Okay.
Of course, unless you didn't believe it, and nothing's going to make you believe something, even if it'll save you, if you don't want to have any faith in it.
That was a huge statement for that many people to be together.
Yes.
And so my mind went to, is that the herd immunity?
No, what happened was people did what they had to do.
They covered up and still protested.
Something as simple as that.
Yes. And
that's the point.
Yes.
Something and at least the mayor realized that, which is why she took the stand she did. She saw that and said, wait, there's something to be said. Nothing fancy.
Yeah, just cover up.
Just cover up.
Yeah. It's amazing. That portal in, needs to be covered up, and it saves time and offers lives more time to recover, because I think the quarantining is really effective and really interesting. That some people were offended and hurt that they were turned away from hospitals, but they didn't understand the severity of being in there.
My nurse's sister was one of those people who went with and she asked to be quarantined at home.
Yeah.
And she lost 20 pounds and became more. She exercises now. I mean, her whole life has changed by virtue of that, but she was at home.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is something that I learned, I think that's called nosocomial.
Yeah.
That you would go in a hospital and probably come out
with something. Yeah, something you didn't have.
You didn't have before. So I can understand her concern about wanting to be at home, because you're around your own germs, so to speak. and your own environment.
Well, luckily, this was very early, and the
Yes.
doctor said, I think that you would be better off at home. If you get worse, we will bring you in.
Hmm.
But she followed everything to the letter.
Yes. Yes. So your opinion on where we are. We are unbelievably 4 months into the year, almost at the end of the year, where when this started, we were just getting into 2020, and everybody was looking for the clear vision. So, where are we in your mindset right now?
With in the newspaper today, there is a article having to do with the number of people out of Oxnard who were sent home questionably inappropriately.
Mm.
Unfortunately, those are black folk who were done so, and I think that's something that needs to be investigated because it looks as though the argument's pretty straightforward. Uh, I can understand why certain people with other problems makes them more vulnerable, but if that's the case, why do people who have none of those problems still die from it? Uh, and why not, if that is the way to help the vast majority, why do we have people who are resisting it because they don't want to believe, number one, that there is a way to handle it, but in a way makes maybe inconvenient,
Hmm.
and you just won't admit that you're wrong.
Yeah.
Now, certain places, my grandchildren are living in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and it's Gwinnett County, which is a small county. And right off the bat, they decided, and I don't think they have any private schools there. But right off the bat, they decided that they would bring the kids in and then they would do it from home. I mean, they finished last year in that way and
Hmm.
they had it done. The problem is that parents who are not flexible can have a problem with that. But luckily, my my daughter works for a company where she can literally do most of her work from home, and her husband is an architect out of Philadelphia
Hmm.
and has been doing work from home now for 4 years.
Wow. Already ahead of the game.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been that situation. Those that are already used to it, it's not been a large
you know,
adjustment. But for the vast majority of people, and I think where the problem becomes is the children is really a concern because they all are not equipped and they're all not taught equally.
right.
They really have less of a chance
They
now.
have less, but luckily that's a kind of well-off county there. So basically, it's they don't even have buses. I
Yeah,
mean, if you ain't got a car, you in trouble.
be ready, right?
That's right. I mean, it ain't nothing close to anything else.
Yeah.
It's,
Oh my goodness.
but
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
and they're just lucky because they were trying to get closer in, but it was
Yeah.
not available. Everything close in was really very expensive,
Mm.
and out there it's reasonable, and it was
Hmm.
also close to where she
Hmm.
worked. So
It just continues to speak that, things happen in life for reasons. And so
yeah,
sometimes you don't find out until
you don't come
after
out. That's right. You found
that this was really good that we couldn't go where we wanted to go.
out.
And you've had a lot of those experiences. And I have to say that it's just been tremendous speaking with you and learning about you and all of that you've gone through. And as we go now very closely to 2021, what do you see as our future since Mardi Gras is one of our big draws? Can we make it continuing to wear a mask?
Well, let me put it like this. If you could get people to do that, I think it's worth a try. But remember, they didn't have Mardi Gras during World War II.
Mm,
So basically Mardi Gras is not absolutely necessary. And if you miss it this year,
hmm.
it'll come back roaring next year.
Hmm.
So you do what you have to do, what is best for you and for the greater good.
Hmm.
And if it means that you don't have Mardi Gras for a year,
Hmm.
you do something else.
Yeah, and the only reason I mention that is because obviously it's one of the biggest times of the year, and of course we're a city that depends on our tourists to come in, and spend some money. So of course, we're struggling in that area to figure out how do we bring revenue and survive. And I think what's interesting is the entire world that's been affected. So, but everybody has a different need.
Well, the interesting thing is when we had the people in town who were demonstrating, that can be used really very positively, because the assumption was that there was going to be a herd circumstance and you were going to see a blossom, and it did not occur. So it means that if you have the necessary people guiding it and people responding and being part, as opposed to not, it can be done.
Yes.
But you can't have folk who, I don't believe in it. Well, whether you believe it or not, you do it.
Yes. And then we have another opportunity right now because we're in hurricane season, and now we have people from our neighboring Lake Charles.
But have you noticed that some of our people from Lake Charles had to be given masks?
Yeah, I see them well equipped now.
No, my wife works for the state. And one of the people, when they moved people in and they noticed people were in, the first thing they did was go down and start giving these people masks, because that was a circumstance that, and it may be that if I had to get out of where they were living under that, I don't think the mask would have been the first thing I would have thought about. On the mind,
sure. So it's not that they weren't practicing, but they were really clinging to just trying to life and
absolutely
to make it out, because we definitely know about that from Katrina and just, like you said, Camille and Betsy, just knowing that, wait a minute, we're about to go underwater.
The last thing I worry about is a mask. I just have to run. Yeah.
We might not be here to wear the mask. So definitely. And they've been complying, and it's, in one way I see it as another positive, because we haven't had visitors to New Orleans. Now we do.
Well, I think the people who are in that capacity, I think they're happy. I mean, they may not make the money they would but they still it's better than an empty room.
They're open.
That's what it's better than an empty room. And basically, I think that this was the place they had to come. I mean, Baton Rouge doesn't have enough. I mean, the areas in Texas that are available are much further away than here. So basically, I think this was the place to come.
Yeah, and I really think it's a positive overall, because we are extending services just like that we received, where they are getting services to rebuild and to find out what they can get so that they can get their life back.
And these people have come through a really bad circumstance.
Oh my goodness. Just the fact that it turned, which is something New Orleans always thinks will happen. We were very fortunate this time that it happened twice. I mean, goodness gracious.
That's right.
Oh my God. 2 in a row. We were just thinking, okay, a pandemic and 2 hurricanes, quite a lot. It's been wonderful. But just to see really people coming together like we do, and kind of wrap arms around people who need the most at the time. So, what's your takeaway from New Orleans? Would you live anywhere else now?
I have enjoyed living in New Orleans, and in fact, I'm trying to think of where else have I lived. The other place that I've lived that I enjoyed was Bogota, Colombia, and I was there for 6 months with a study group.
Okay,
and that was really an interesting circumstance. But at the time, I had left there out of Atlanta, but I was really happy to see Atlanta back.
Yeah.
I never learned any Spanish.
I was about to say, you went to Colombia. You needed to know something else.
I'm gonna tell you what happens is I was there during the time when the Men on the Moon. So I'm walking down the street in Bogota, and everybody's standing looking at the television, and I walk up. And a guy walks up to me and he says, "North Americano?" I said, "Yes." And I wondered how he knew I was a North Americano. So I said, "How'd you?" He said, "You're 6 feet tall, man." You say, "You see anybody else that's 6 feet tall?" And this guy was.
We know you're not from here.
Yeah, this guy was from. He's from Haiti.
Okay.
And he said, "You see anybody else 6 feet tall?"
He was paying attention.
Yes.
That is incredible.
And
Yeah, a
then
lot of people
yeah, and
can
then
tell.
everybody turned around and congratulations on the about your countrymen.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting situation. I
A
had
lot
forgotten
of
about that.
Yeah, a lot of times we really are not aware of what people observe
Yeah,
about us, and we're just sort of walking and looking around and seeing what we see. But I think that says a lot about the world, about people. We're more alike than we are not,
yes,
and so people are observant. But noticeably, you were taller.
yeah, yeah. And I never learned Spanish.
You know,
Remember, I told you I had trouble when I was college.
when you said Bogota, I thought, okay, when you said 6 months, then I understood. I said maybe you
Well,
figured out,
no, what happens is that you
Mhm.
walk up, and the moment they know that you're North Americano,
Yes,
they want to speak American
that's
English.
true. That is true.
I mean, and I used to fly in and out, and
Hmm.
when I would be in Cati, a policeman, lieutenant, would wait for me
Okay.
to sit and talk American with him
Yes.
until I went to Bogota.
So you had an interpreter.
Yeah, yeah, well, no, we spoke English.
Oh,
No,
right. He wanted to speak.
yeah,
That's right.
he wanted to speak
And
American
so that was
English.
his opportunity
Yeah,
to practice
that's right.
with you. Well, that's what we find. People always want to come to America. It is the land. It is the place where people can believe that their dreams can happen.
But they want to speak American. They don't
Yeah.
want to speak English.
Okay. They want the television. Is it the
Yeah,
television version? They want to know how to
they,
really
that's right.
relate.
That's right. They want to talk as though they were part. They
Yes.
don't want. Yeah. So I would sit there and tell them how to say it and how. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was fun. I enjoyed that.
Well, I love it. It still says a lot about people, that people really are people, and I think for the most part, people want to be treated equally and treated fairly. And a lot of times, that's not going to happen every situation, but people have feelings, and everybody responds to that.
Yeah, I would be with a doctor, and we would go up in the mountains.
Hmm.
And whenever I went up in the mountains, I would take a box of gloves,
Hmm.
and I would give them to the doctor who was there, who, by the way, was a senior medical
Okay.
student.
So,
And I'd give him a box of surgeon gloves, and he would look at them and he'd say, "Do I get one?" I said, "No, you get the whole box."
oh my
And
goodness!
he would go, "Whole box?" Yeah, I said,
Wow.
"Yeah." And that's what I would give them for them showing me around their facility. And these were senior medical students who were covering these clinics.
Yes, with not much.
That's
Not
right.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
to him, one was he was
they
grateful
were going to wash it
and
and dry it.
reached
Yes.
a box. He must have said, "I'm rich. I have what I need." That's amazing. Yeah, we have so much, and we really don't know what other people do without that we could actually give and spare. And it's amazing. So we all have a lot that we can offer
I
to
had
one
forgotten.
another.
I had forgotten that.
I'm so glad I brought. That's what this is about,
Yeah.
reminiscing. so and you have a lot. I bet there are so many memories that you have, especially being in the military and just traveling and meeting other people from other places. Would you be who you are without having those exposures?
I tell you, I am not upset for anything that I have been through.
Yeah.
I mean, even the stuff that was questionable,
Hmm.
at this point, there was only one bad circumstance that occurred when I was living in Mississippi. A group of us Boy Scouts had gone out to this DeSoto National Forest, and we were encountered by a group of white ruffians
Hmm.
that were chasing us around, and that was the only negative thing that I can remember.
Wow.
Now I probably have others, but
Yes.
that I still remember that
Hmm.
circumstance.
Hmm.
And we were taken by a farmer. We ran into his yard and told him what was happening. This was a white farmer. And he stood there with his gun and he says, "If you come any closer, somebody's going to die." And they left.
Hmm.
And we knew those were white kids.
Yes. And they knew what he was talking about.
Yes.
Well, I think that is still great, just to say that everybody does not feel the same way about a circumstance, and that you can find good in every race and in every color.
Well, I appreciate growing up in Biloxi.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, nothing like the South, right?
Yeah. Well, but Biloxi was different.
Yeah. Still just very different. Yeah.
It's small.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the neighborhoods blend in
Hmm.
together.
Hmm.
And they have a lot of people who have retired from the military there, so they're not Mississippians. They're from down, and they don't mind living in neighborhoods that are mixed.
Yeah.
And it was really a very positive thing.
Would you find that the more people learn and understand, the better they can accept situations and handle it?
I think the more people live together, the more they understand other people. Of course, there's always a circumstance where that's not the case, but that's because nobody wants to learn.
Education is powerful.
Yes.
Very much so. Well, Dr. George Stanley Walker, my goodness, you have really enhanced our lives today on the Focus podcast. And that's what we do. We focus on people. We've had this you have just brought us down memory lane with so much that's happened with you that made you who you are. And so, and what year is it for you in your practice? How many years?
Oh, God.
I'm bringing them all up.
Let's see. I came here in, I don't know, it's about 30 years.
About 30 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are you accepting new patients?
No, right now, basically, where we are right now is clinical trials, and I do that. And I also do, I have a few people who have what they call chronic pain syndromes, and I see them. And I have some other patients that have been my old ear, nose, and throat doctor patients who still come and see me for specific problems that they think other people don't treat correctly.
Because they know you.
Well, yeah, but I'm happy to see them because I've known them for so long, and they are part of me, and I'm part of them.
Fantastic.
And I like sitting there just talking to them.
Yeah. But is there a problem that is more common amongst all that you've treated?
Interestingly enough, the big thing is bronchitis.
Even before the pandemic?
Oh, before that. When I was working at LSU, one of the doctors brought up the idea that steroids would really help a lot with pulmonary problems because of the congestion, and he started using Celestone, which is very close to dexamethasone. And the way he used it was really a strange way. He would give a large dose and then for a short period of time. And what some people do is a small dose for a long period of time, but you have all kind of problems then. But a large dose and then 2 days cut it.
Yeah.
And what that does is it knocks out the inflammation, bam, but it doesn't give the side effects.
Yes.
So I started using that after I saw that, and a lot of the patients who had those problems refused to go to the other doctors because they don't want prednisone, they want dexamethasone, Celestone, and they know about it because they've got it, they're dealing with it, and they can't convince the doctor to try something new. So I still see them.
Go where it works.
Yes.
Yeah, and I find that's a problem many people have said over the years. They gain weight. Because they take it for way too long, and then it's not really as effective as.
Well, see, my patients know large dose, short period of time.
They have the answer.
That's right. They have, and they only use it when necessary because they know the side effects.
They're educated.
Yes.
See, it works. They learn how to really take care of themselves, even with the medication from the doctor. I love it. That is wonderful. Well, that's good news that somebody else can benefit from. So they can say, well, where's this doctor again? Well, it's been wonderful. And so I hope that people, listening will take away just great memories along with you and just really appreciate all the efforts that have been made in your life and all that you have made as a contribution, ear, nose, and throat, because we definitely, they all connect.
Yep.
So we need all of that. And what's the best way we can continue to take care of ourselves, in this COVID-19 culture?
The most important thing is mask. If a circumstance looks threatening, do not go.
Yes. And wash your hands.
Yes. Now, that's something that I basically, I keep forgetting. But, I think the most important thing is that mask. I mean, and I go back to the people who were here for the protest. You know that they didn't have a situation where they could wash their hands.
Sure.
But because they were masked, there was no significant increase. And I thought that was a very, very, very important circumstance.
Yes, yes. Well, I agree. And I'm looking forward to the outcome. Are you looking forward to a vaccine?
Yes,
helping to.
I am, but I'm wondering if it's going to be like flu. You have to take it every year.
And we're in the flu season
We're in the
now.
flu season right now.
So
Yes.
what a combination. Do we
Yeah.
need a steroid treatment with that?
Actually, no. The most important thing about steroids is if you have an inflammation, and let's say you have asthma. Okay, asthma can be treated with the inhalers and all. But when it becomes really a problem is when you have that wheezing because you can feel the that's when you need the steroid because it then gets rid of the inflammation.
Yes.
But like you said, you cannot keep them on that because then you run into problems associated with steroids.
Side effects.
That's worse than anything. So it's got to be a short period of time, high dose. You can't just give a piddling. High dose, short period of time. And then that goes away. And it will stay away as long as you follow your regimen. And most people who have asthma are very good at that.
They understand how it works,
they
and
know,
what triggers it, and
they
what
know exactly.
helps
And
them.
when they come in and they say such and such and such has occurred, they know.
Yes.
Now, if they tell me, I got a lot of wheezing, Dr. Walker, I need something else, I say, you think we need an X-ray? Yeah, I think we need an X-ray. Well, if they say, yeah, I think, you better believe it because
we get it done.
They know this better than anybody else.
I love it. Well, it's nothing like a doctor and a patient who knows what they're talking about to take care.
I guess
and it makes a sense.
Well, a lot of these people I've known for 20 years.
So they've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Well, they're still here.
We have learned a lot.
There you go.
Okay.
Everybody's grown together. So this is wonderful to hear. And it has to be such a wonderful way to look at your career, just to see the people that have benefited from you and who still do today. So what a great way to look at your life. And we just know that you're going to continue. So I'm not ending it and putting a period on it, but thank you for everything you've done, and please continue to provide all that you have as people continue to learn what it means to take care of themselves. And thank you for reminiscing with us and allowing us to share in that. So everyone, this has been another Focus podcast, and Dr. George Stanley Walker, we know him now, and so we'll look him up and see what he's up to.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for staying until the end and enjoying the Focus podcast. It is a pleasure to bring you great people doing wonderful things in the community and beyond. If you know someone that I should interview that everybody needs to know, leave the information below so that I can connect with them. Take care and God bless, and stay focused.